What do we do when history gets it wrong? Imagine spending millions of dollars on a valuable piece of history, only to discover that it was fake all along.
It's fake, bro. It's fake.
Some forgeries are so convincing that they can alter the course of history, and that's going to be the topic of today's video. Forgeries and fraud. In 2nd century Rome, there was a famous physician and author by the name of Galen. One day, as he was walking through the streets of Rome, he passed by a bookseller's stall. There he saw two men arguing over a certain book for sale. The author of the book? Galen. The vendor was insisting to the doubtful customer that the book really was Galen's. However, the other man was equally vociferous in claiming that it could not be, since the writing style was completely different from Galen's. Galen was more than a little perturbed that someone was trying to sell a book under his name, and so the famous physician of the ancient world went home and composed a small book called How to Recognize the Books of Galen. That story was from chapter 4 of Bart Ehrman's Jesus Interrupted, where he discusses the forgeries of the ancient world. Bart Ehrman is a renowned New Testament scholar, and his work on Jesus Interrupted was not only the inspiration for this video, but is one of the primary sources I used in my research. If you're thinking to yourself, why should I even care what a New Testament scholar has to say about history? Then you're making a grave error. Even if you are an atheist or agnostic type, like me, then you still ought to care at least a little bit about the biblical manuscripts, because they are some of the best preserved ancient documents that we have. If you've got a few bucks, I'd recommend checking out some of his books. They were really enlightening and accessible for an idiot normie like me who can't read German or ancient Greek. According to Ehrman, it is sometimes argued by scholars of the New Testament that forgery was so common in the ancient world that no one took it seriously, since the deceit could be easily detected. But Bart responds to these claims by stating, I have spent the past couple years examining the ancient discussions of forgery and have come to the conclusion that the only people who seem to make this argument are people who haven't actually read the ancient sources. As odd as it might seem, the practice of forgery is so widely condemned that it is sometimes condemned even in documents that are themselves forged. Ehrman also lays out 10 different reasons why people in the ancient world may have forged pseudoepigraphic documents. But I'm only going to discuss 9 of them. Before the printing press, all copies of books were written by hand, which introduced all kinds of errors. Thus, librarians in Alexandria would pay top dollar for original copies of works by famous figures like Aristotle. Consequently, an impossible number of original copies of works by thinkers like Aristotle started cropping up. Forgers would sometimes create documents to attack their philosophical adversaries. By attributing these criticizable works to authoritative figures, they aimed to undermine their opponent's credibility and influence. Forgers often wrote documents that argued against philosophical and theological positions and practices that they disagreed with. By presenting their arguments as coming from respected authorities, they sought to sway opinion and suppress rival viewpoints. Groups and individuals forged documents to support and validate their own religious beliefs and practices. such that they could claim that their traditions had ancient and divinely sanctioned origins. Certain members of certain philosophical schools would write treatises in the name of their master teacher and sign his name to their own work, since one's own thoughts are simply the extension of what the master himself said. This is said to be especially true for the followers of Pythagoras, though some doubt that these forgers did it for this reason. The 3rd century church father Tertullian was caught in the act of forging manuscripts, and was then deposed from his church office as a result. His defense? That he had forged the work out of love for Paul. The challenge and thrill of deceiving others was also a motivation for some forgers.
Got him! Got him!
Who took pride in their ability to create convincing forgeries and enjoyed the intellectual exercise of fooling both scholars and the public. An author named Dionysius set out to fool Heraclides of Pontus by forging a play in the name of the famous Sophocles. Heraclides was fooled completely when Dionysius uncovered his deceit and revealed that if you took the first letters of several lines of the text, you could form several acrostics, including one that said, "Heraclides is ignorant of letters and is not ashamed of his ignorance." In the Bible, within 2 Thessalonians verse 2:2, wow, that's a lot of twos, Paul warns against a letter forged in Paul's name. However, there's good reason to believe that 6 of the 13 Pauline epistles, the books of the Bible allegedly written by Paul, were themselves forgeries, including 2 Thessalonians. Early forgers also often attributed their own beliefs and viewpoints to respected figures to lend them a greater credibility, because it was the easiest way to gain a following. Every group of early Christians had access to writings allegedly written by the apostles. Most of these writings were forgeries, as most of the apostles, with the exception of Matthew and Paul, but Paul wasn't an apostle technically, but most of them would not have had the prerequisite education to write, or at least not write well enough to communicate in a written narrative structure. Forgeries were not limited to the ancient world. In the modern world, there are too many instances of forgeries to go through them all, but here are a few examples. In 1983, the world was shocked when the German magazine Stern announced that 62 volumes of Adolf Hitler's diaries were purportedly found in an East German airplane crash site. However, the initial excitement regarding this wealth of historical knowledge gave way to a staunch skepticism. Handwriting analysis and forensic testing revealed the diaries to be forgeries, and the ensuing investigation traced back to Konrad Kujau, a notorious German forger. Stern magazine and the historians involved faced not only significant embarrassment, but legal consequences. The forgery highlighted the need for rigorous authentication processes and raised questions about the credibility of both the media and historical scholarship. A A notable case of art forgery involves the American painter Basquiat. Basquiat was a prominent figure in the neo-expressionist movement and gained significant fame in the 1980s. In 2022, the Orlando Museum of Art was embroiled in a scandal when 25 purported Basquiat paintings were seized by the FBI on suspicion of being forgeries. These works, claimed to have been created in the 1980s, were part of an exhibition titled Heroes and Monsters. Several experts raised concerns about their authenticity. Notably, one of the most compelling pieces of evidence was the use of FedEx boxes as part of the artwork, which had labels and typography not used until after Basquiat's death in 1988. While the FBI's seizure was based on substantial evidence pointing towards forgery, the investigation is ongoing and the artworks have not been conclusively proven as forgeries in a court of law yet. But the preponderance of evidence strongly suggests that they are not authentic Basquiat works. Forgeries and deceptions aren't just confined to historical manuscripts or expensive art. Just like how ancient forgeries tricked scholars and collectors, ghostwriting in hip-hop also involves a person falsely attributing the creative force of a work to a reputable figure for the financial gain of the person putting it forth. Of all of the forms of fraud and forgery that we've discussed so far, ghostwriting is generally the least bad, or at least it isn't always bad. In 2015, Meek Mill took to Twitter to accuse Drake of using ghostwriters, specifically mentioning Quentin Miller. Quentin Miller was an up-and-coming rapper and lyricist who claimed that he had not ghostwrote for Drake, and that the Drizzler was heavily involved in the creative process. But when the reference tracks leaked, the public had a very different impression.
I can tell you how it happened. I can tell you about them safe house nights out in Calabasas. I can tell you not a rapper.
I can tell you how it happened. I can tell you about them safe house nights out in Calabasas. I can tell you not a rapper.
Quentin has indicated in interviews that perhaps the compensation he received was not enough, as the backlash led to him missing career opportunities and even getting jumped.
Quentin Miller wouldn't write for him. So they blew it up like, this motherfucker write for Drake. You know what I mean? And that's how it really came out. And that's why Dream Chasers beat Quentin Miller up in LA and all that shit.
Wait, Quentin Miller got beat up?
Yeah, they see yo about that shit. They beat Quentin Miller up in Foot Locker or some shit.
I've never heard this.
Yeah, that happened.
And
People was at me that worked in the Foot Locker when it was going on.
Okay. So Quentin Miller got beat up by the Dream Chasers.
Yeah.
Because
this is after all the everything.
It's true. It's true. They caught me. We was in LA. I was walking to the Nike store, and he approached me, and this was really my first time really talking with me, and basically told me like, he didn't appreciate the letter that I dropped, and it made him seem like he was a liar or whatnot, and they fucking stole off on me in the Nike store and ran. I shed blood in the Nike store on Wilshire.
Hip-hop is a genre that sustains itself on young blood. Obviously, what happened to Quentin was unfair, and it's wrong for bigger artists to feast like vultures on the creativity of smaller artists who are still trying to make it. However, creatively speaking, using writers and ghostwriters deserves the exact same criticism. In neither case are the ideas conveyed in the art actually coming from the creative mind of the performer. But using writers is not new in the music industry. It's been going on for forever, and it's not new to hip-hop either. A lot of highly respected artists would have to be disgraced if we were going to discredit every artist who's ever used a writer. The thing that's wrong with ghostwriting is generally that it can lend itself to more exploitative interactions, not the lack of creativity. But ghostwriting is not necessarily exploitative. For example, if hypothetically Dr. Dre offered Eminem $200 million to ghostwrite an album for him, and Eminem takes the deal, that isn't exploitation. Eminem might not get the credit he deserves for his labor, but he agreed to do it and got paid a handsome amount. On the other hand, if Dr. Dre offers some random unknown rapper $0 to write an album for him, crediting him on every song, well, those writing credits don't guarantee the rapper a career, so that might be seen as exploitative. In both cases, the thing that we actually care about is the exploitation, not the ghostwriting or writing itself, fraudulent as it may be. Nevertheless, ghostwriting in hip-hop can deceive fans about who the true creative force behind their favorite tracks is. Throughout history, experts have developed several traditional methods to detect forgeries and fakes, including stylistic analysis, provenance research, and material analysis. Stylistic analysis is the most artistic method of verification and involves scrutinizing the unique features of an artwork or manuscript to see if they match the known characteristics of the purported creator. For example, looking at the color choices of a painting might help determine whether a work is truly created by Van Gogh. Provenance research is the most historical approach to verification and involves tracing the history of an object through its documented ownership records. By verifying the chain of custody, experts can establish the item's legitimacy. This would be like authenticating a medieval manuscript by piecing together its journey through museums and libraries. And then material analysis is the most scientific approach of verification in the traditional methods. Material analysis involves examining the physical substances used in the creation of an artwork or document. By analyzing the pigments, ink, paper, etc., scientists can determine if the materials are consistent with those used in the claimed time period. For instance, verifying an ancient manuscript might involve checking if the sort of parchment used actually existed at the time and place where the work allegedly came from.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
Modern technology has brought a new dimension to the detection of fraud and forgeries, with artificial intelligence leading the charge. AI leverages advanced machine learning algorithms to analyze various aspects of artworks, manuscripts, or historical artifacts by training on extensive datasets of both authentic and forged works. For example, subtle variations in the strokes of writing styles can reveal a forgery that might go unnoticed by the human eye in a more traditional stylistic analysis. Several groups are looking at using AI for verification. Some examples include the Swiss company Art Recognition, New York's Metropolitan Museum of Art, Rutgers University, and the British Museum, to name a few. While some would use these tools to generate the forgeries themselves, these tools also make institutions and organizations better equipped in the fight against fraud and forgeries. So when we detect these sorts of frauds, what can we actually do about it? Well, our only choice is to retcon our historical records. Not an ideal option, but adherence to the truth is sometimes worth the public confusion. But this is not always a worthwhile endeavor. For example, Pythagoras was likely not the first one to come up with the Pythagorean theorem. The ancient Babylonians seem to have known about it centuries before Pythagoras came along. However, his followers were the first ones to provide a proof for it, as far as we know. But at this point, enough people know it as the Pythagorean theorem that it's almost not worth correcting. As we've seen, the art of forgery has evolved from ancient manuscripts to modern-day scams, affecting every field from literature to painting to hip-hop. Forgeries have the power to deceive, to rewrite history, and to shake our trust in what we believe to be true. Yet, they also push us to develop better methods of detection, to scrutinize more closely, and to value authenticity. Whether it's Galen in ancient Rome, Konrad Kujau with the Hitler Diaries, or ghostwriters in the music industry, each case of forgery teaches us the importance of critical examination and skepticism. It reminds us that our collective quest for knowledge and truth is ongoing, and that the lines between genuine and fake are often blurred by those who seek to deceive us. Modern technology, especially AI, is a double-edged sword in this fight. While it can be used to create forgeries, it also equips us with powerful tools to detect and prevent them. The continuous advancement in these technologies promises a future where identifying authenticity becomes more precise, reducing the chances of falling victim to fraud. In the end, the stories of forgeries are not just about deception. They are about our desire to believe in something genuine, to connect with the past, and to cherish the truth. As we continue to unearth forgeries and learn from them, we must remain vigilant and remember to question the narratives presented to us.